Okay, so here is part two. So we now have our schema, but we don't have any actions. You'll see how this is all wired up together in a second, but the pattern that we have in core is you have queries, how you access the data, schema, how your data is defined, and actions, how you can change your data from a controller. So you can have as many of them as you want. So for example, if we have a normal thing like an activity, you can clone it, you can create one, you can delete one, you can update one, you can do a batch operation on one, like change all of these activities' names to the same thing or something weird like that. An account has actions, you can create them, delete them, update them, and upsert them. Kano syncs them, so it upserts whatever activity you can find in Noriega. So for pricing configs, we pretty much want some pretty standard stuff. So I'm going to go to an example of, let's see here, what do I want to do? I just did a very clean one. How's this one? Yeah, you want to be able to create one. So let's just do a simple create action. Sorry, Chris, I'm a habitual copy paster if you're actually watching this video. So we're going to call this our create.ex. So the first thing, obviously, we got to fix the namespace. So I want to say core print to config action create. This is aliasing. This allows you to say print ticket config instead of core.print ticket config. And this is sort of an interesting thing that's happening here. This is why you shouldn't copy paste, because this is not a standard action. Right, but that's kind of a weird one. Let's see how, okay. So anytime you want to create one of these, you're given just params normally, okay? And the general pattern is you take your params and you pipe them into your change set. This is what we just made. So print ticket config is print ticket config. Change set's just a function, because everything's just a function. Change set's given a new, oh yeah, of course. The first param of this is a new one of these. Okay, so you're going to take a new print ticket config. This is like kind of like saying, you know, model.new, and you're going to pipe it into change set as the first parameter. So you're saying change set, a new one of these with these params, new one of these plus these params, and then you want to insert it. We won't do the insert bang because we want this to fail if it's not going to work. Bang will raise an exception if it doesn't work, just like in Ruby. And that's it. This allows you to now create them if you use this action. Pretty simple. If we then want to make an update, it's very similar. The difference is you're given one of these. Okay. And so that's the same thing. You take the print ticket config that was passed in, and you make a change set saying change it based on these params, and then instead of insert, it's update. Okay? And that's now called update. And honestly, I don't think you're going to need a delete, because you shouldn't be able to delete a config, right? Every partner is going to have one of these, so we have to kind of figure out how to lazily create them. And now that I think about it, this is probably why Chris did upsert. Yes, I've caught up to Chris. So what he did in the what's it called? The pricing config, he only has one action called upsert. And the reason for that is he wants every account to have one. And now that I think about it, it's exactly the same thing for you. You should just assume every account has a pricing config that's empty, because the primary key is just your account ID. Yeah, this is very smart. Good job, Chris. So we're just going to switch things over and kind of see how it lines up. So this is actually going to be called upsert. Okay, and so you can, and we can delete our update. Okay, so you can upsert these by saying, if you give it params, it looks for the account ID, it does find or new, but instead of one of these guys, it's a print ticket config, but we have the same query. And if it can't find one, it makes a new one. And then instead of this, it calls this change set, and we're done. So it's identical to what he had done, just with a different model, which is pretty cool. And actually, believe it or not, that's largely it. The only thing we haven't done now, we have our one action we're going to need. We have our query and our schema. We haven't actually let you do any of this stuff. There's no controller for it. So there's a router.ex, just like there would be anywhere else. This is just like Rails. And if we look for core, you'll see that we have all of these resources, just like Rails had. Well, we need a new one. I'll follow Chris's lead. This is a print ticket configs. And the only thing you're allowed to do, he says, is create, basically posting a new one. I think that that's actually not what we're going to want. I think we're going to want to actually have an update. Only an update, because we'll lazily create one every time you ask for it. Okay? And this is a print ticket config controller. Okay. This doesn't exist yet. We haven't created it. We've just said that in theory, you're going to be able to access this route. And if you do, you should use this controller. So the structure of the API is, now we're in a new app, right? We're in the API app, not the core app. This is the equivalent of like going into Apex or something like that. So we have this API, and what I've set up for a pattern is this folder of pods. These are just a way to keep all of your namespaced resources together and follow some conventions. Every pod has a controller, a policy, and a view. This is, again, we're in the API world now. This is, are you allowed to do what you're trying to do? GraphQL for the app pulling this data is completely separate. We actually have a GQL folder that does your GraphQL interface that replaces all of this. But since Stetson's not using it, we need a crud API, which only Stetson will use, and we need a GraphQL API, which is how the app will pull this data. We'll do this another time. This is just to get Stetson working. So what we need is, just like any of these other things, we've got a folder. So let's, copy pasta. So we basically need a new folder. And this is going to be called print ticket configs. Okay. And we'll look at what that gives us. Print ticket configs are going to have a view. This is the easiest part. This is a core print ticket config. A view is exactly a serializer. No different. They just call them serializers. So what you need is it's going to have a handful of things. It's going to have an well, it's only going to actually have print ticket config schema. It's going to have only these two fields. Okay, and I believe we have to do something clever here. We have to say define ID. It's schema.account ID. Ember needs something called ID. The JSON API spec doesn't let you arbitrarily pick an attribute as the ID. So to Ember, there is going to be an ID. The ID just happens to be that. No problem. And actually, now that I think about it, maybe also I can expose the account ID, because why not? So that's our view, print ticket config view. It has a policy. This is now this is the ability of like can, right? The equivalent of can. So who's allowed to see these print ticket configs? Well, it's pretty straightforward. We don't need this concept of an internal user. Okay. We can deal with that separately. Every user has an account ID, so you're only allowed to, and this is a little bit of a weird one because the account ID is the ID, right? It's a little bit weird. But that's actually a little bit, right. So you're only allowed to access the account ID that matches your user's account ID. Elixir, and then we get rid of this. So I'm just kind of thinking through this stuff. So yeah, you're allowed to view the index and create them. Actually, we don't have the ability to create them. You're allowed to, and we don't have the ability to view an index either. That's not a thing. all you're allowed to do is, in theory, read, and this is cool pattern matching Elixir. This says you're going to pass me a user, and I'm going to set the account ID of the user to this variable, account ID. You're going to pass me a ticket config who has an account ID as well. I'm going to set it to account ID. The fact that I've used the same variable for both of these means this will only pattern match to true if these match each other. So this is a clever way of saying you're allowed to read any ticket config if it matches your account, and you're allowed to update any if they match your account. If you give me anything else, you're not allowed to do anything. That's heady, but it doesn't really matter for now. Finally, our controller. This is print, well, just do this. Print ticket config. So now we have a print ticket config controller. We have aliased all these things, and then this is like our equivalent of like a base controller. You don't need to do any of this crap here because there's nothing special. There's no index route. And let me think about that for a second. We don't need an index route. We need a show route maybe. We need an update route. We don't need a delete route. So we don't need delete. And we actually only made one model. So this is the upsert we made, right? Actions upsert. I'm saying anytime you update, when you try to post to an update, use the upsert. So if you post and one didn't exist yet, just make one lazily. And then crud create params, what's it doing? It's saying put the ID. I don't know why it would be doing this, so I'm going to leave this out for now because I don't think we need it. And that is in theory done. So what we can do is we can try to test this out using paw. So I can go into paw and I can try to do this stuff. So let's make a new, I'm going to take and make a new folder. Let's see what's a good one to start with. We'll just start with activity. Okay. And we're going to call these pricing print ticket configs. Okay. So we don't have this concept of creating them, so we can get rid of that route. Right? All we have is the put route. So let's just delete it. And we have a show route. Just deleting these routes we don't need. And we have a get and we have a put. So when we want to show one, we're going to just say go to print ticket configs by ID. Okay? And the ID is actually the account ID. Right? That's how we want to set that up. So the way we do that is we can do some clever things here. We can, let's see if this works. Right, I don't have an actual account ID set up. That's kind of annoying. Let me just cheat. Let me go to my account ID. So this is my account ID. Okay, so our URL, normally you'd use a variable in the URL like this is doing, but okay, so what did this do? This did a 404. This is saying print ticket config /ID isn't a thing. So let's see why that is. It looks like a mistake on my part. So in our router, you're supposed to be able to go to print -ticket -configs. That's why I invented that URL. Print ticket configs. Okay, so core print ticket config /ID. Really? Let's see what I did wrong. Core print ticket configs. Oh, I don't have a show route. You're supposed to have a show route. Let's see. Let's see what this does. I think I caught it mid-compile, which it sometimes doesn't like. Okay. Okay, so what this is saying is that I am asking to show. There's a little bit of a weird thing because we need to lazily pull these. Like one doesn't exist yet, right? So I'm going to kind of ignore this route for a second because it's a little more complicated. We need to say find or create on show, which is just something we don't normally do. Let's instead work on the print ticket configs update stuff we did. So if I go to this is a core/print ticket config, and the ID is this. And the only things you can update are what? You can update the logo body image or URL to be like http www.google.com, and you can update this guy. Okay, let's see what happens if we post this. Okay, 400. Okay, so it looks like I passed in bad. Right, it doesn't like the comma there. Let's try again. Okay, 500. Scope 3 undefined. So let's see what happened here. Right, I think I know what's happening here. I think what's happening is my scope doesn't like the fact that these don't exist yet. I'm going to, for the sake of moving this forward, I'm going to say that anybody can do anything. I'm going to say if you pass anything else in, it's just that. Okay. So what this is saying is somebody is calling scope 3, and oh, core API config policy. Core API, oh, configs. That's got an S. That's not right. Yeah, I named my file wrong. Okay, 403 forbidden. This is better. So this is saying that this policy returned false, right? Which makes sense, right? And well, it might not. It won't make sense to you, but it makes sense to me. I'm going to cheat right now, and I'm just going to say anybody can do everything for these. Now we're talking. So now it's saying I have another mistake. Core print ticket config upsert perform is undefined. So I'm calling upsert perform with two things. Right. So upsert is my action. So print ticket config upsert is an action. It was only accepting one thing right now, and I'm calling it with two. And I now know why Chris did this as a create route, which I have to think about a little bit. I think that crud update, right. So he has a pricing config controller, and he's using the create method. He's posting every time you want to change it. But that's because he's not actually editing these from Ember. Ember's going to have a hard time doing that. So Ember is going to always update. And so I think what we have to do is we need, as silly as it's going to look, I think we need to just have the upsert action in my ticket config take a param that it doesn't actually use. Hey, I did it. So this update resulted in me getting a model back with the things I asked for, at which point if I do a show route, I get a 500. So let's see if we can fix that now. So let's look in our database and see what it created. Okay, so it created one, count ID, yada, yada, yada. So that all worked. So then the question is, how come our show route didn't work? So, so our show route is saying can't find data to serialize. This means there's like a nil coming back. So let's see why that would be doing it. The way crud show works. Oh, I didn't define the show. Crud show. Right? That's weird. Wait, I've screwed something up. How do you do a show? Yeah, crud show. Simple as that. So crud show, the way that works is, Let's confirm that I'm not crazy. Yeah, show. So print ticket configs, print ticket config slash ID. Make sure that ID matches 74. No, it didn't. Why did yeah, it didn't actually create it with this ID. Oh, you know what? Now I understand, I think, why Chris did what he did in his pricing configs controller. In his pricing configs controller, he, no, he's not doing that. I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind. Okay. Okay. So we have an upsert action. We have a print ticket config upsert. So this is looking for the one for the account ID, find or new. Ah, yeah, account ID. Oh, yes. Okay, this is actually really funny what's happening. So, for context, what's happening here is it's my PAW document has a user attached to it based on what's in my header, my auth header, right here, and this token has a user attached to it, and it's using that user as the user ID that it's putting this account ID in. So this is actually the URL that I need to be using for a show route. There it is, and found it. So kind of confused. It's just a paw thing. So I hard-coded the wrong partner, the account ID in here. And so now I can do a show. So sort of fumbled through that in there, but like the point is you can now put to this URL, and you can now show by ID. So all that we have to do now is this. We just have to say that an account view has one print ticket config. I'm going to actually cheat here, and there's an interesting syntax you can do as a one-liner right here. You can say it has one of these, which is a print ticket config, and the field is account ID. And we'll show you what that does. So by doing this now, if we pull my account, I'm just going to reload page. Let's reload this page. And you're going to see that on page load, Stetson does a call for the account. Oh, my Stetson may or may not be running. Oh, that's a shame. Sorry about that. My Stetson's not even running. Well, let's instead, well, I'll get my Stetson running. It's just unhappy with me for some reason. Stetson. See what's happening in Stetson's world right now. Oh, it's not actually started. That's why it's not running. Oh, none of this is installed. Okay. Well, what's going to happen here is it's going to ask for an account. So let me just see if this works. If I create a new account, yeah, that's not going to work. Yeah, my paw situation is not set up, so I can't show you this very well. Well, whatever. Point is, this exposes a relationship. So so Stetson can say that a partner has one print ticket config, and it'll fetch it asynchronously. It'll ask it for ID by ID. with this field. So it'll just say, give me print ticket config ID foo. And so the only thing we didn't figure out how to do is how to find or create that model when you give it a new ID. And that's something we can talk through separately. The high level view of it is print ticket config controller. Just has a show. The way crud controller works is crud show. Oh yeah, that's cool. Crud show fetcher is overridable. Okay, and so we need to actually override it, because normally what we do is we do something like this. We call find, but instead what we want to do is we need to call find or create. So it's actually dot find or create by ID. That's all we have to do. Okay, so that allows us to pass in any ID we want into the URL. Let's see if Ember's booted yet. No, it's still not booted yet. So we can put in any ID we want. Let's see if this still works. Okay, so what's going on here? I think I have a compilation error in the Noriega side. Boot up Ember. Okay, yeah, I have a compile error of 15, no function ID, right? I might have just made up that param, right? I actually need the ID, okay? And now when I find no function find or create, right? I invented that method. So finally, print ticket config query only has find. It needs find or create by ID. And the way it'll do that is just like we did in the upsert. We did this, right? And so what we need here is we either do find that ID or get a new one whose account ID is the ID. That's find or create. And that gives us the one with the real ID. Let's, for fun, so if we make up a different number here, it actually did return one, right? This isn't a real account ID, so I don't think this could actually be persisted, but it kind of gave one in memory, kind of brought one back to you, both nulls. At which point, in theory, if you try to put, it would say that's not a real account ID, it can't be persisted. But that's the logic to find or create. And believe it or not, that's largely the feature. Stetson just has to now restfully talk to that new model, core/print ticket config. I'm going to stop the video there, and I'm going to push this up to GitHub.